Hasn't even started. I'm like, are we
Welcome
done?
back.
I haven't done it yet.
All right, any questions before we start? I haven't had my coffee.
Oh,
But now they
take your
get
time.
confused.
Drink your coffee.
Take my
Settle
time.
in. I work at Starbucks, so you gotta like swirl it and sniff it. And
Extra credit if you
where
could
does it
bring me-
land on your tongue? I'm serious.
Extra credit if you could bring me a vanilla blonde coffee.
Say less.
Oat milk, soy milk, almond milk, non-fat.
Almond milk. Yeah, with sugar.
Do we get an A on the test? On any test if we do?
So that's a Dunkin'
Now you're
Donuts
cushy.
coffee. No, I'm kidding. Yeah,
He said what?
no A on the test.
In a short-
Okay, talking about the different functions of the brain, motor cortex, right? So we're talking about different areas. This one is located at the rear of the frontal lobes, right? So we get an illustration of the frontal lobes. Okay. Frontal lobe is here at the front of the skull, right? The parietal lobe is at the top, occipital on the back, temporal lobe over near your ears. So we say motor cortex controls muscular movement. So it doesn't do it all in just one individual muscle. It controls activity for coordination of several muscles, right? That make your arm, legs, other parts of your body move. Right? Given part of the motor cortex commonly triggers coordinated activity in a number of different muscles. Right? So think that nothing singular, it doesn't in coordinated fashion. Some other areas. Areas of the cerebral cortex that receive sensory information from other regions of the brain and connected to memories and stored knowledge, enabling psychologically meaningful experiences. Right? So you think of, you have muscle memory. So if you play sports and you do a certain activity over and over and over again. I'll say shooting free throws, right? You say, I want to be excellent at shooting free throws. You can store information in your muscles, right? And that will go with the cerebral cortex and the motor cortex as well, too. So it captures meaningful experiences, right? So your brain takes in information from all the stuff that happens throughout your day, everything you see, everything you experience, and it will store things that's valuable and discard things that are kind of useless, right? It automatically does this. Now, as we talk about like dreams, right, and sleep, we'll talk about how that all processes overnight, or whenever you take a nap, or when you go to sleep, depends on the different phases of sleep. How you also can extract information from dreams. All right, prefrontal cortex, right? That's the one that separates human beings from practically every other species in the world. Right? Ours is vastly complex, it's large, it's dense, and it allows us to focus attention, concentrate on facts, right? Manipulate information. So we can do statistics, we can run algorithms, we can take all sorts of information and do creative things with it that other animals cannot. And align behavior with social rules. So prefrontal cortex looks at values, ethics, rules, laws, understands it, and try to align yourself with those things, right? So it's basically very important for social behavior, right? Interacting with each other. All right, so it's a key for capacity for complex conceptual thinking, enables human thinking for tasks such as language, art, and emotion. And so in psychology, we have multitude of intelligences, right? right? You would say general intelligence, which is subjective. You would say that's IQ, right? You would say that's an intelligence quotient. But there's so many different forms that we understand now, right? One is emotional intelligence, right? How to understand the emotions of other people, understand the emotions of yourself, be able to express. Cultural intelligence, right? How to make sense of others who are different than ourselves, right? How to observe others and see the meanings that they make out of their experiences in life. Right? The meaning in their food, the way they dress, their belief system, how they interact with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And then language, right? As far as we know, we're one of the, I would say not one, but there are other species that do it. But in terms of language, we're really diverse. Travel anywhere around the world, you may find yourself not understanding exactly what's being spoken or the symbols of the writing as well too. All right, so you have two hemispheres in your brain. For the most part, the right side of your brain controls sort of left side activity. Right? The left side of your brain controls sort of right side activities. Even your eyes, they cross optic nerves, right? Your right eye crosses over your left, well, your right optic nerve crosses over your left optic nerve. So essentially they, on opposite sides of each other, crossing, right? Like, that's interesting. What is this all about? Right, you can say, well, philosophically, maybe we are two people, right? You slice the human being in half, you have a right side and a left side, combine the two, now you have a whole person. Maybe by design, that's the way it should be, right? But we do have two hemispheres, nonetheless. And they specialize in analytical tasks, including math and language. So the right hemisphere, the right side of your brain, is specialized for spatial thinking, which means you're able to perceive depth, how far something is, how close something is, right? How wide, how linear. And the ability to create and think about images. When we say, hey, we kind of think in schemas. Schemas are like mental concepts. The number one, right? If I say it out of my mouth, you're gonna see visually the number one in your mind, right? If I say the letter A, you may see it uppercase or lowercase a, but you're gonna visualize it, a mental visualization. Right? So we're able to think and create images from this. And the corpus callosum, and that's in the center part of your brain, it's this thick tissue that connects the two, right? Keeps your hemispheres together. And it allows for the two halves to work in sync, which means that, one side is not just working on its own, the left side is not just working on its own. For the most part, they kind of work in conjunction with each other at all times. Left brain. So sometimes you'll hear people be like, oh, you're very right brain, right? And then some people say, oh, you're very left brain. Right? So we saw here, your right brain. Your right hemisphere, you're like, oh man, that's the artistic people, right? Your right brain, oh, you're a musician, you're a director, you're an actor, you're a painter, you're a sculptor, right? And if your left brain will say, well, it specializes in language diversity. So we had a study here. Paul Broca studied people with impaired language ability, or aphasia, who could understand but not produce words. Okay? Which means we say, once again, different parts of the brain do specific tasks. Even if you damage one part, you still can understand other things. Here, these people had aphasia, which means they can understand language but not produce words. They really can speak words, but they can understand exactly what people were saying. So this damage to the area in the region of the left hemisphere, now called the Broca's area, Bernanke studied people who had lost the ability to understand language and discovered that a different area, now called Bernanke's area, that's in the left hemisphere, called a person to be able to hear sounds but not understand what those sounds meant. So basically the opposite, the inverse. All right, language and arithmetic have much in common. So it's been theorized if you're good at math, you may be good at picking up a new language, right? For the most part, at what time in your life do you think it's easiest to learn a new language?
You're ready to speak.
Yeah, like if you want to teach someone a new language, when's the best time to do it? Yeah, right? Let's say you teach it to children, right? Children have, at that stage in their life, long-term memory processing is very, very strong, right? Because they have a blank canvas, essentially, right? They have a blank canvas, so things stick. Here, we don't, we're older, we don't have a blank canvas. It's mixed up with a bunch of stuff we've already learned. So to try to make sense of a new language mixed with an old language we already know, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. So if you teach your children early on, you can teach them 4, 5, 6, 7 languages, and they'll probably stick for the rest of their life. All right, so both are analytical tasks, right? Activities that require one to combine symbols or objects in a step-by-step manner according to specified rules. Math has rules, language has rules, right? You see the difference between Spanish and English, how some of the words come after each other, right? Maybe in English, there may be a lot of words in Spanish, maybe before. So it sounds like we said the same thing and try to mix English and Spanish together. It wouldn't make sense because some things come after, some things come before. It sounds weird. So it has specific rules, just like math. Right, there's a study called, there's a school of thought called semiotics, and that's how you study symbols and interpretations of symbols and logos and brands and how you see the meaning behind things. This is kind of the same thing. They must be used in a certain order. If symbols, right, or arithmetic or words, language are presented out of order, the meaning is lost, right? It becomes confusing if you don't follow the rules. Spatial tasks require people to create mental images, such as mental rotation experiments. This will involve forming an image in your mind, then imagining what the image will look like from a different visual angle. It's like picturing this room, and then try to imagine the room tilting 90 degrees, maybe southeast, and then seeing if you can still find the orientation where things are, right? Be very difficult, right? But those who have that skill are pretty good at math and pretty good at spatial tasks. A lot of it has to do with like engineering and things like that. So we say the corpus callosum is the ears, right? It's in the next two halves, right? When it's removed, the two halves function without input from the other, which means it still can function, but to be very linear thinking wouldn't make sense. Things wouldn't make sense. They have to work together. So, okay, let's see. On the left-hand side, we have key. So left hand has a key, right? And let's say right hand has a, they're not really showing them, maybe the right hand has a ring, right? And so if this was removed, this person would say the key is a ring. And they would say the ring is a key, right? Because we say these, the process crosses one another. So if you sort of interfere with one side, it's gonna tell the other side that it's the opposite of what the truth All right, some networks in the brain. The brain has a third type of organization based on communication links that cut across the higher, lower lobes and right sides of the brain, enabling rapid communication among them. As a result, brain activity in the different regions is coordinated. Many of these coordinated transmission run through the thalamus. In simple words, you have a vast network of activities that happen in the brain, and they all kind of centralize in the thalamus. Okay, what can we do to see activity in the brain, right? We do MRIs, fMRIs, PET scans, several different sort of electromagnetic and magnetic resonance testing. Right? So fMRI is functional magnetic resonance imaging, a technique used for measuring brain activity that uses magnetic fields to track the changes in cerebral blood flow before and after a participant engages in mental activity. All this to say, in the fMRI, you essentially are looking for electrical activity in the brain. So you show someone, say, a television screen or pop-up letters, images, you will see what part of the brain actually highlights, right? Produces an electrical signal. So therefore, you could know that this particular area of the brain is associated with this type of thing. All right, some new imaging methods are recently developed to visualize nerve fibers that connect into the regions of the brain. The ultimate goal is able to connect the entire neck. New sort of scans we have. That's part of that. That's good. All right, why might a person not recognize the face of a loved one? In Capgras syndrome, right? We'll talk about that later. But people have a strange experience not recognizing the face of a familiar loved one. Babies do this too, right? Babies often you're like, oh, why does the baby cry when every time I see it? Well, you're not seeing the baby enough, right? Babies at that stage, they're all about survival. So if they see a strange face, which they don't see repetitively, they'll think that face is a threat, right? What they're used to is the caregiver, mom and dad, or the brothers and sisters in the face, and that makes them identify the difference between people who are a threat and people who care about them, right? The mind, right? This syndrome reflects a failure in coordination among its mental systems. The person recognizes the face, but lacks the feelings associated with it, right? We can say, here in our mind, here's an issue, right, with Capgras syndrome, right? So we recognize the face, but lack the feelings associated with it. So you see a person's face that you know, but there's no emotion to your mom or your dad. And at the brain level, the syndrome reflects a breakdown in the communication between the two parts of the brain. Fusiform face processing area responsible for facial recognition. Let me see if they show an illustration here. Part of the limbic system that produces the emotions that normally confirm you're looking at another loved one. So many words, your limbic system is sort of agitated here. You can't produce emotions that you normally would have for somebody that you know. Okay, so where does it all start? It starts with neurons, right? Those are brain cells. And let's see if we have a good illustration of that. Okay, here we go. Neurons. And you're like, well, how does it all work? How do we get in information and shoot it out from one cell to the next in the brain? Well, we'll start here. We have these things that look like branches on a tree, and their sole purpose is to gather information, right? Receive information. So they're called dendrites. So dendrites receive information from neighboring cells. That's their purpose, right? And then we can say, here is the cell body, just like any other cell body that we have in our body. Here's the nucleus. The nucleus would contain all the processing of the information that needs to happen. All right, processing here in the nucleus. The soma, if you ever see the word soma, soma means body. So sometimes if you hear someone say somatic symptoms attributed with like a psychological issue, meaning like, hey, I have depression and it causes my body to feel weak. You say, okay, the issue is depression, but it manifests itself in a physiological body. So soma is the body of the cell. The nucleus processes all the information here in the cell. And then once it's ready to send out that information, sends it down this highway. All right, this highway is called the axon. So a good way to think about it is the axon is like a copper wire, right? It's like a wire, an electrical wire. Because primarily a lot of this information is electrical, right? Mixed with chemicals. So you say, well, okay, what happens if you just have a bare electrical wire? In fact, that wouldn't be good. The electricity could possibly escape. You'll lose a lot of energy. It wouldn't be well insulated, right? Thus, we need to insulate wires. The same goes here. So we have what's called a myelin sheath, right? It's basically the coating of this wire, or this highway, if you want to call it that, axon. And this is where the information is being shot down. All right, and here you have axon terminals. This is where it's going to start sending out information to the neighboring cells. Even, well, what creates any of this to happen, right? How does it all kind of start? Remember I said we have a balance in our body of all things. Homeostasis, right? We're all balanced. We're born with a balance, unless there's a defect. Then we have an imbalance. And let's just say the balance is at 50 yard line, right? But let's not say 50, make it simple. We'll call it 0. So you're like, oh wow, okay. Something increases over 0. Anything, any sort of phenomena, anything you experience, anything you take into your body, anything, you would say it crosses over the action potential threshold. You say that's what actually makes stimulus, right? That's what makes any of this happen to shoot information down. If not, to just stay here stagnant. But it doesn't, right? Something has to happen. We call it an action potential, right? It means some stimulus that happened above a threshold of your homeostasis that says, interesting, we got information that needs to go down here and go tonight. We have billions of these neurons. And they may seem small right here, but some of them extend all the way from your brain to the bottom of your spinal cord, right? So not all of them are small. Remember we said the spine and the brain are essentially fused together. So some of these neurons could be very, very long, and some of them could be small, right? You got billions. All right, and then so axon terminals, their sole purpose is to keep sending out information. All right, so action potentials, nerve impulses, right, and impulse. This is electrochemical, right? So we got chemicals in our body, hormones, all sorts of things happening. They mix with the electricity that's in our body, and with an electrical current, it travels down the length of an axon. It's very interesting. It almost feels like we're robots, right? We need electricity to shoot down information, chemicals, right? This is all pretty cool. All right, and it's extremely powerful, and it happens at the speed of light, right? You think you're thinking, you're writing, you're doing something right now. These are all action potentials, right? Millions of things in your brain happening right now. All these neurons sending and receiving information right now as we speak, right? To make you do something, right? To make you pick up your pen. And we can measure these with electrodes placed outside the head. All right, so we covered myelin sheath. Gray matter, areas of the brain that are made up of mostly neuron cell bodies and dendrites that contain no myelin. White matter is abundant of myelin axons traveling from one region to the other. So we do have gray and white matter. Right? Some of it is not covered in myelin. Most of the things that are very, very important are. Right? Okay, so you're sending out one neuron with information to the next. You're like, hey, do they touch? Like, obviously they have to touch, right? And one neuron meets the next. Because how would you send out information if it don't touch, right? It's like trying to get two electrical wires together that don't make them touch and make something happen. Like, nothing happens. But here, it happens for us at the synapse, which is a small gap, about 20 nanometers wide, that separates any two neurons. So chemical signals between neurons might bridge this microscopic gap, right? And we'll call these chemicals neurotransmitters. So these are the primary way that neurons communicate. They skip, right? It's a little tiny gap in each one, and it skips and it sends out important chemicals to the next one. So they kind of bubble out, like little quick bubbles that go from one neuron to the next. So here's an illustration of it. Okay, so we're sending out information down this axon, right? It's coming out this way. And we say here's the receiving neuron, so we can see like dendrites are over here, down here to receive all this information. And so we say, well, okay, we got the axon terminal, which is this area, neurotransmitters, which are basically the chemicals that need to go from one neuron to the next. Then we got these little receptors, right, on the end of the receiving neuron. We say here's the dendrite, right? But all this is a gap, right? And they kind of bubble out and float, and kind of go from one to the next. So you think, well, what if not all of the chemicals make it, right? What if there's not enough chemicals to go from one receptor to the next? What happens? Some of it we store, right? Some of it kind of hangs out and waits for its next turn to go. Some of it our body breaks down and it just kind of, eliminates itself, dissipate. So it's not a perfect system, but it manages itself perfectly. So back to these synaptic vesicles, right? We can say here, which are these tiny holes within the neurotransmitter. They're small sacs that store and transport neurotransmitters with the neurons and release them to the synapses, and the receptors are the sites on the dendrites. All right, major neurotransmitters within the body. All right, acetylcholine. This one is used by the spinal cord neurons to control muscles, right, and regulate memory. We can say this one is excitatory, right? It amps up. Dopamine, right? This is a big one, right? It produces feelings of pleasure, to sort of your reward benefits and reward benefit sort of hormone. Has multiple functions depending on where in the brain it acts. It's usually inhibitory. So think of dopamine as your pleasure kick, right? If you drink coffee, caffeine will give you dopamine effect. You're like, man, this feels wonderful. And if you take certain drugs, right, you'll get a dopamine kick, right? You have a lot of energy, a lot of pleasure. Anything dealing with pleasure, right? You can think of anything. And then we got GABA, right? The major inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. Glutamate, most commonly excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. Norepinephrine. This is a hormone and a neurotransmitter. we'll get to the nervous system, how that works, but it works for fight or flight response. And then serotonin, which controls mood, appetite, and sensory perception. Right? In the spinal cord, serotonin is inhibitory in pain pathway. Inhibitory means it stops something. It can block something. Right? So here we say it blocks pain. So if you suffer a major injury, let's say you work on a construction site and a big steel beam falls on your leg, right? But you can't see it. Maybe you fall on your leg and you're facing the opposite way, you know. You're laying on your stomach, you're looking that way, and it fell on you behind. First thing what happened is before your brain processes that you can visually see that how bad the damage is, serotonin will kick in and stop some pain, right? Norepinephrine to kick in to help with some of the pain, dopamine, all sorts of things that happen. And then you realize, you're like, oh, you know what, my leg is not just crushed, it actually amputated my leg. Right? So your legs are gone. And now if your brain recognizes it, right? So we say the brain, when it finally recognizes it, it does something different, right? Maybe you pass out. And your brain is like, oh, fight or flight. You're like, we're gonna flight. We're not gonna fight this, and you know, and look at it and scream. We're just gonna pass out, right? So that's where norepinephrine comes in. Like fight or flight. We're gonna flight. We're gonna run away from this issue, and we're just gonna shut everything down and pass out, so we don't have to look. Or we say we can fight. We look at it and we scream in pain. Oh my gosh! You know how it could happen, and maybe it doesn't even hurt as much as you think. But this is all automatic processes, and you know your awareness is something you control. So now you just fixated on not having your legs, and it probably makes you act differently than the actual pain that you experience. All right, glial cells. So many words. These supply nutrients to neurons and disposing of the brain's biological waste matter. Right, so we say the glial cells help with, remember we say you may have some leftover chemicals there, right? What do you do with them? Sometimes they just break them down as waste.
What just breaks it down?
Yes. Nervous system, complete collection of neurons that transmit signals amongst parts of the body. Right, so this is your signal highway, right, for information. And we say that's why the brain and spinal cord works together, right? The whole purpose is to send information to different parts of the body. And the spinal cord does that because that's branches that sends off nerves to your arms, legs, toes, fingers, everything else. And so we get two parts, central and peripheral. Let's see if we get an illustration before we look at this. Okay. All right, so we say, here's your peripheral, right? And so we say brain, spine, fused together in some way, a bunch of nerves coming from the spine. And here, we'll come back to the autonomic. Let's kind of figure out what it is first. So your central nervous system, found in the center of the body, it's two main parts of the brain and the spinal cord, right? That's easy to understand. And these have their own neurons, right? These nerve cells that respond to external stimuli and send messages about the environment to the spinal cord. It's taking in information from the outside, right? And processing it from the inside. Motor neurons control your body's muscles and bodily movement. Some bodily actions do not require symbols, right? Signals. Those are called reflexes. They're involuntary. They just happen. What do you think some reflexes are that people have?
Someone tries to hit you. If someone tries to hit you.
So if someone tries to hit you, your reflex is
To die.
Okay, to dodge it, to get out the way, right? Good.
Or to flinch, like
Flinch.
tying up.
Yeah, flinch, tighten up, right, it's automatic reflex. What else?
Someone scares you.
Yeah, someone scares you, what do?
Throw up your fist.
Alright, you may throw up your hands, you may scream yourself, right? What else? Somebody had their hand up. Other reflexes you could think of, things you automatically do.
Isn't it like when they hit your knee in the doctor?
Yeah, there's a point for a knee jerk, right? A knee jerk response, as we call it. What else? Right? We have all sorts of reflexes, things that we just do automatically. Simple reflexes can be carried out by the spinal cord, and interneurons receive information from sensory neurons and send information directly to nerves that contact muscles. Alright, so we say autonomic nervous system, right? Remember, autonomic, we're just talking about things that happen on their own to keep our body alive, right? Keep things going. So we got parasympathetic, sympathetic. Easiest way to think about this, one is to calm you, and one is to excite you, right? Which means that if you start running right now, you're like, okay, I'm running, and now my heartbeat, which is normal now, it's pumped up really, really fast. There has to be an automatic process to bring the heartbeat back normal, right? So we say it's like this teeter-totter sort of system, right? Some things have to come up, and other forces have to bring it back down. So we say, get back to normal. The normal heartbeat is homeostasis, whatever that is, right? Normal blood pressure is whatever it's gonna be if you're resting, just relaxing. Right? Your normal breathing is maybe what you're doing right now. But if any of that stuff gets excited, we need another system to bring it down. And if any of that stuff gets too calm, we need another system to bring it back up, right? So it works together with each other. All right, so most of this controls bodily functions and organs. You say, okay, I have to use the restroom, urinate, defecate, I have to breathe, right? Control it, breathing with your lungs, right? Your lungs expanding, contracting, heartbeat, stomach to digest food, and put acids to break down, right? And say even reproductive things, ovaries, testes, right? Produce eggs, produce semen, right? To create more children for the rest of the human species. So peripheral, found in the periphery of body, outside the central nervous system. So it's this name because it's on the outside of the spinal cord, right? It's towards the outer edge. Consists of the somatic nervous system and the automatic nervous system, autonomic, sorry. Your cranial nerves are found in your head, and these nerves extend from the bottom of the brain to structures of the head. And then the spinal nerves, right? Extend from the spinal cord to the body's neck, torso, and limbs. All right, so back sympathetic prepares organisms for fight or flight. Parasympathetic maintains normal functioning of the body when one is not under threat or stress, like activating digestion and elimination and restoring baseline heart rate and blood pressure. So think if fight or flight, okay? We're all back in survival mode. You know what, I'm being chased by somebody, and they're gonna chase me for 8 blocks. Right? And they have a deadly weapon, they're threatening to kill me. You know what I can't have happen? I can't have happen that I use the bathroom while this person's chasing me, else I'm gonna die. Right? So think about it. So here we say this one, activating digestion and waste elimination. Right? So we say this one would stop it. Right? This would stop having to use the restroom if you're under threat. No matter how much water you drink, no matter how much food you ate, right? This system recognizes that you're under a threat and we have to shut down some things, right? Restrict, contract, all sorts of things, so that you're able to get out and survive. Right? And then we say this one to bring it back down. Start activating. Once you're back relaxed, you got away from your killer, you go sit down, and now you're like, oh, okay, now I gotta go use the bathroom. Right? Because everything woke back up again. Right? All right, this is fascinating that the body just does all this together without us thinking about it. All right, what time is it? Okay, almost there. Endocrine system, right? This is hormones, the glands that produce and secrete hormones which carry messages from the brain to organs via the bloodstream. What are some hormones you could think of? Yeah, right, estrogen. What else? Testosterone, right? What else? Anyone can think of any other hormones? Okay. We have a bunch, and we'll talk about it. Now, hormones are biochemicals that the endocrine system uses for communication and travel through the bloodstream, right? Carry messages to the body's organs. Melatonin, serotonin, things like that, right? So sometimes if you're deficient in producing certain hormones, then your doctor will prescribe you some medication that hopefully creates extra that you're lacking, right? But sometimes that becomes bad because then your body is supposed to naturally produce these things. And if you take medication long enough, now your body's just dependent on it, which means you can never come off the medication. So pros and cons of medication, right? They can save your life, but don't be on them too long because now you can't make the stuff anymore. All right, they impact psychological functioning by changing people's moods, their motives, mental abilities. Right, if you're hungry, blood glucose level go down, and now you're cranky, you're hangry, things like that, right? Change your mood. All sorts of things like that. Glands are bodily organs that produce and secrete chemicals. The pineal gland produces a hormone called melatonin that influences patterns of sleeping and wakefulness. So think of pineal gland essentially is used to understand light, right? Receive light information. Which means that if you're in your room trying to go to sleep and there's any light on, including your phone, and you think like, I can't go to sleep, right? It's your phone, right? That gland is so powerful, it can pick up light from like 15 feet away, just from your phone, right? They're like, there's a little night light in here, I'm having trouble sleeping, probably the light, right? Any sort of light is automatically there to recognize, hey, there's light, and you should be awake, the sun is out, right? So we got all this artificial light to sort of fool us, right? Automatically say, don't go to sleep, don't go to sleep. So think about that. We'll talk about sleep habits in another chapter. Pituitary gland, right? Master gland of the endocrine system. Remember we said this one does like growth hormones. But it regulates stress response, reproduction, and metabolic rate, right? So metabolism. That's why I say people who are giants usually have some issue with the pituitary gland. Metabolism is either too slow, too fast, reproduction of different functions in the body is too much, right? Bones become too big, bones, things like that. All right, let's end off here. Let's end up here. And we'll come back. We'll talk about how it's a miracle that you exist. What time is it now? All right, someone Google for me. So who here thinks that it's a miracle that they're alive, that you exist? Why do you think?
Because I love my life.
Who love your life?
Yeah.
It's a miracle because there's like, I don't know if it's billions or millions of sperm cells swimming in like every uterus. and each one of them is instance from each other. And the fact that you, like one out of millions or billions of sperm cells, made it to the egg and grew up and managed to survive and got birth and all that.
There you go, he answered it for us. Did you guys hear him? You don't recognize it. You won the lottery. 200 million sperm tried to make it to the one egg, fighting against each other, killing each other, right?